You did everything right. You showed up early. You stayed late. You learned the systems faster than anyone else. You became the person people called when something needed to get done properly. And somehow, you're still in the same seat, same title, similar pay, watching people who worked half as hard get moved into roles you were quietly waiting for. That's not a coincidence. And it's not bad luck. You did everything right. And that's exactly why you're stuck. This video isn't about people who are failing at their jobs. It's not about the ones who clock out at exactly 5 o'clock and never read an email after hours. It's not about the disengaged, the apathetic, or the ones who stop trying. This is about the ones who are doing everything well. The ones who genuinely care, who put in real effort, who take pride in doing things properly. And yet, something isn't moving. What I want to walk you through today is something that most career conversations completely miss. Because the conversation is usually about how to get better, how to be more productive, how to deliver more value. But almost no one talks about the point where being good stops being an asset and quietly becomes a ceiling. There's a point where being good stops helping you and starts costing you. And most people never see it happening. Let's start with what actually happens when you become very good at something. At first, it feels like momentum. Your manager notices. Your colleagues respect you. You become the reliable one. The person who doesn't need to be chased, doesn't need to be corrected, doesn't need to be babysat. And because of that, more comes your way. Not a promotion, not a title change, just more. The difficult client goes to you. The broken process that nobody else could fix, yours. The new team member who needs onboarding, they sit with you. The last-minute request that landed with no warning and needs to be done by morning. Naturally, it ends up on your screen. It feels like recognition, but it's actually redistribution. You've become the person the organization leans on. And that feels good for a while. There's meaning in being needed. There's a quiet dignity in being the one who actually understands how things work. But here's what's happening underneath that feeling. Every time you solve a problem, you train the system to bring that problem to you. Every time you absorb extra work without complaint, you signal that you have capacity. Every time you train someone else, you make yourself easier to keep right where you are, because now you're not just doing one job, you're holding up 3. And the organization doesn't need to promote you. You're already doing the work of someone 2 levels above you, but you're doing it at your current level's cost. But here's where it gets worse, and this is the part nobody talks about openly. Think about the last 6 months at work. How many times did someone come to you because you were the only one who knew how to do something specific? How many meetings did you prep for someone else? How many problems did you quietly absorb so that things didn't fall apart? Now ask yourself, where is your name in the story of that success? Whose presentation deck carried those results? Who stood in front of leadership? You kept the engine running. Someone else drove the car. It feels like contribution, but it's actually invisibility. There's a specific dynamic that happens in almost every organization, in every industry. When someone becomes the go-to person for a particular task, whether it's the reporting, the client management, the technical troubleshooting, they get a kind of informal ownership over it. And that ownership sounds like power. It sounds like leverage, but it isn't. Because ownership at the execution level is not the same as influence at the decision level. And as long as you are indispensable to the running of a machine, you cannot be moved. You cannot be promoted upward. You can only be stretched sideways. The organization will tell you they value you. They do, just not in the way you think. They value the function you perform. They value the reliability you provide. They value the fact that they don't have to think about whatever it is you handle. That is a very different kind of value than the kind that moves careers forward. Let's talk about something that takes most people years to understand. There is a fundamental difference between repetition and growth. When you first learned the thing you're now very good at, you were growing. Your brain was making new connections. You were uncomfortable. You were making mistakes and correcting them. Every week you were capable of something you weren't capable of the week before. But at some point you crossed a threshold. You stopped learning the skill. You started executing it. And executing a skill, even a complex one, is not the same as developing. It feels like mastery, but it's repetition. Mastery is the end state. Repetition is the maintenance. And you can spend 5 years in maintenance mode and feel like you're working incredibly hard, because you are, without ever actually moving forward. This is the part that feels uncomfortable to say out loud, but it needs to be said. Efficiency is not progress. Getting very fast at a task that belongs to your current role does not move you toward the next one. Being the person who can close 10 tickets where others close 4 is impressive, but the person closing 10 tickets is still a ticket closer. The person deciding which tickets matter, that is a different job entirely, and the skills required to execute well are almost completely different from the skills required to advance. Execution skills are things like precision, the speed, technical knowledge, dependability, attention to detail. These are the things that make you good at your current role. Promotion skills are things like strategic framing, stakeholder management, narrative construction, risk visibility, cross-functional influence. These are the things that make organizations want you at a higher level. And here is the painful truth. The more time you spend perfecting the first set, the less time you have to develop the second. And this is the part nobody tells you. Being efficient at the wrong things is one of the most effective ways to stay stuck. Think about the people around you who have moved up quickly. Were they necessarily the most technically capable? Were they the ones who produced the cleanest work, who knew the most, who could be relied on for every granular detail? Sometimes, yes, but often, not quite. Often they were the ones who were very good at making their work visible, who understood how to position themselves in conversations, who asked questions in meetings that made leaders think, this person sees the bigger picture. That is a completely different skill set. And it's not one most people think to build, because the entire message we receive growing up, in school, in entry-level jobs, in performance reviews, is that doing good work is enough. It feels like a meritocracy, but it's a perception game. Let's talk about how organizations actually make decisions about who moves forward, not how they say they make those decisions, not what the employee handbook describes, how it actually works. Promotions, leadership opportunities, stretch assignments. These are not primarily determined by output. They are determined by perception. That doesn't mean your work doesn't matter. It does. The work is the floor, the minimum requirement to be taken seriously. But above that floor, what moves the dial is how you are seen. Who knows your name? What they associate with it? What story gets told about you when you're not in the room? If no one is telling your story, you don't have one. This is a difficult thing to sit with, especially for people who were raised to believe that hard work speaks for itself. For many of us, the idea of self-promotion feels wrong. It feels arrogant. It feels like you're overselling something or asking for credit in a way that seems almost desperate. But there's a distinction that matters enormously here. There is a difference between bragging about your work and making sure your work is known. When a project succeeds, someone narrates that success to leadership. Often, the person who narrates it is the person who gets remembered for it. Not necessarily the person who did the most work. The person who told the story clearly. When a problem is solved, the solution gets attributed to whoever framed the conversation around it. Whoever said, "Here is what we were dealing with. Here is how we approached it. Here is the result." That person gets the credit, not because they claimed it unfairly, but because they did the essential work of making it legible. And this is the part nobody tells you. Visibility isn't vanity. In most organizations, it's survival. Think about your last performance review. Your manager sat across from you, or on a video call, and described your performance. What did they lead with? What examples did they use? And more importantly, were those the examples you would have chosen? Did they reflect the things you're proudest of? The problems you solved that nobody else saw? The moments where you made something significantly better than it would have been without you? Or did they describe the visible things? The things that landed in front of them? The deliverables they could point to without needing to look closely? Because a manager can only advocate for what they know, and they can only know what you make legible to them. The colleague who emails a brief summary after solving a complex problem isn't showing off. They're doing the essential work of making their contribution real in the organization's memory. The person who says nothing and solves just as much, they are invisible. Not because the work didn't happen, but because in organizational reality, unwitnessed effort has no weight. It feels like modesty, but it's erasure. There's something that happens over time that is almost impossible to undo once it's set. You get labeled. Not officially, not on any document, but in the informal, persistent way that organizations actually operate. You become a noun. You become the Excel person, the operations guy, the one who handles compliance, the one who fixes the client escalations, the technical lead who everyone goes to, but nobody thinks of when a director position opens. And here's the thing about that label. It was given to you because of something good. You earned it by being genuinely capable. It started as a compliment, but a label is also a container. And once you're inside it, the organization stops imagining you outside of it. It feels like a reputation, but it's a box. I want you to think about how hiring decisions and promotion conversations actually happen in most organizations. A role opens up. Someone senior asks, "Who do we have for this?" Names come up. Associations follow immediately after those names. Sarah, she's strong, but she's our main person on the key account. We can't move her right now. Marcus, he's excellent at what he does, but I'm not sure he's quite ready for the strategic side of this role. James, good guy, but he's very operational. This needs someone who can own the client relationship. Every single one of those statements sounds reasonable, and every single one of them is a label doing its work. Quietly, without the person in the room to offer a different version of themselves. The person who advances in that conversation is the one whose name already carries a different set of associations, who is already seen as someone who operates at the next level, even before officially holding the next title. But here's where it gets worse. Labels are not just limiting. They are self-reinforcing. The longer you stay inside one, the more convincing it becomes. The more people default to seeing you in that frame, the harder it is to rewrite, not because you haven't changed, but because the story hasn't caught up. Here is the quiet truth that this whole conversation has been building toward. The reason you're stuck is not that you're failing. It's that you're making it very easy for the organization not to notice. When you are easy to manage, when nothing breaks on your watch, when no one has to worry about you, when everything just gets handled, you remove yourself from the kind of attention that leads to opportunity. Good managers care about problems. They care about gaps. They care about who they need to develop, who needs support, who is at risk of leaving. If you require none of that attention, if you are perfectly self-contained, you become part of the furniture. Relied upon, invisible. It feels like professionalism, but it's disappearance. And there's something else that compounds this. Your silence is being misread. When you don't articulate ambition, when you don't say clearly where you want to go, what you want to learn, what kind of role you're building toward, the organization fills that silence with its own interpretation. And the interpretation is almost always, they're satisfied. They're comfortable where they are. They don't need anything from us right now. You might be quietly desperate for change. You might have been thinking about this exact thing for 2 years. But if you've never said it, clearly, specifically, to someone with the ability to act on it, it might as well not exist. Not creating urgency around your own growth means no one else will create it for you. So let's talk about what needs to change. Not in your work ethic, that's not the problem. In your understanding of what the game actually is. Competence is not a strategy. It's just the baseline. Being good at your job is the entry requirement. It's what gets you in the building. It is not what gets you to the next floor. And I think a lot of people, smart, capable, and genuinely excellent people, have been running a strategy of just getting better and better at what they already do, expecting that eventually the institution will notice and reward them accordingly. That strategy has a ceiling, and for many people, they've already hit it. They just haven't named it yet. It feels like a long game, but it's a loop. The shift that matters isn't about becoming less good at your job. You don't abandon the thing you've built. You stop treating it as your only currency. Because growth, real career growth, requires 3 things that competence alone cannot provide. It requires visibility, being known for what you do, not just doing it. It requires positioning, being seen as someone who belongs in spaces beyond your current one. And it requires risk, doing things that are not guaranteed to work, not perfectly safe, not entirely within your comfort zone. Organizations do not promote the safe choice. They promote people who have already demonstrated they can operate at the next level, even while still holding the current title. And this is the part nobody tells you. The promotion is often the recognition of something that already happened, not the beginning of something new. What does this actually look like in practice? It starts with an honest accounting of where your effort is going. Not all effort is equal. The hours you spend perfecting something within your current role are not the same as the hours you spend developing something that belongs to the role above it. The first kind of effort keeps you competent. The second kind makes you visible, as someone ready for more. This doesn't mean doing less. It means being more deliberate about what you do with the discretionary part of your capacity. The time that isn't purely consumed by your existing responsibilities. The people who break out of this trap are rarely the ones who worked less. They're the ones who redirected some of their effort toward relationships they hadn't cultivated, toward projects that crossed the boundaries of their role, toward skills that belong to the level above, not the level they're on. They also started talking differently about their work. Not boasting, not performing, but framing. There is an enormous difference between reporting what you did and framing what it meant. One says, I fixed the reporting error in the dashboard. The other says, the reporting error was causing the team to make decisions on incorrect data. I identified it. Jay corrected the source and put a check in place so it doesn't recur. The second version is 3 times as long. It is also 3 times as visible. And it's not exaggeration, it's context. Context is what converts effort into narrative. And narrative is what converts performance into opportunity. And then, perhaps the most uncomfortable thing of all, saying what you want. Not as a complaint, not as an ultimatum, as a statement of intention. Having a conversation with your manager or your manager's manager that says clearly, without hedging, this is where I am trying to go. This is what I am building toward. I would like your guidance on how to get there from here. That conversation changes things. It makes you visible in a new way. It signals ambition in a way that is professional, not arrogant. And it puts the other person in a position to help, or to at least stop accidentally overlooking you. The organization did not know you wanted more because you never told it. I want to leave you with something to sit with. The frustration you might be feeling right now, the sense that you've been working hard and not moving. That frustration is not evidence that the system is unfair. Although it sometimes is, it's evidence that you've been playing one game while the rules of advancement belong to a different game entirely. You were told to be good, and you were good. And that was the right answer to the wrong question. The question was never just, can you do the work? The question the organization is always asking, silently, without putting it on a performance form, is, do we see this person at the next level? Can we picture it? Does the way they carry themselves, talk about their work, engage with leadership, take on uncomfortable things, does all of that tell us they're ready? If the answer to that question is no, then even the best output in the world won't move you forward. Because the work is just the proof. The story is the argument, and you haven't been making the argument. This isn't about becoming a different person. It isn't about becoming someone who performs ambition rather than feels it. It's about understanding that the work you've been doing in silence deserves to exist in the world more loudly. That the value you've been creating deserves to be attached to your name. And that the next chapter of your career won't be written by staying exceptional at what you already do, and it will be written by expanding what you're willing to be seen doing. The trap isn't that you're bad at your job. The trap is that you became too good at something that was never designed to move you forward. If this video showed you something that you couldn't see clearly before, subscribe and turn on notifications. And I will see you in the next one.